Ambassador Lyra of the Nexary Republic stood before the holographic transmitter in her crystalline office, her delicate blue-tinged features creased with worry lines that had deepened over the past 3 months. Her species had evolved from peaceful herbivores on a garden world, and their large, expressive eyes reflected the depth of a concern for her people. Outside the transparent aluminum windows of a tower office, she could see emergency supply ships struggling through the atmosphere, their cargo holds barely containing enough food to last another week. The sight that greeted her each morning was heartbreaking. Freighter after freighter landed at the spaceport below, carrying whatever food supplies her government could purchase from neighboring systems. But it wasn't enough. It would never be enough. Their primary agricultural moon, Vidania, which had fed the Nexary Republic for over 2 centuries, was dying. The fungal blight had appeared without warning 6 months ago. At first, it seemed like a minor crop disease that their agricultural scientists could handle with standard treatments. But this organism was unlike anything in their databases. It consumed not just the crops, but the soil itself, leaving behind a gray, lifeless dust that couldn't support any known form of plant life. Dr. Kev, her chief agricultural advisor, had delivered the final report just yesterday. Ambassador, we've lost 97% of our food production capacity. The blight has spread to every continent on Vidania, and it's showing signs of jumping to our secondary farming colonies. 50 million Nexary citizens, including nearly 12 million younglings, were facing starvation within 6 months. The emergency rationing had already begun, but their food reserves were dwindling faster than anyone had predicted. Lyra activated the quantum communication array, knowing that this transmission would be her people's only hope. The holographic interface hummed to life, displaying the ornate seal of the Galactic Aid Council, a symbol of hope for species facing extinction-level crises. Galactic Aid Council, this is Ambassador Lyra of the Nexary Republic, transmitting from Nexary Prime on emergency humanitarian frequency 77 Alpha. She began, her melodic voice steady despite the crushing weight of responsibility on her shoulders. Our agricultural systems have suffered complete catastrophic failure due to an unknown fungal organism. We have approximately 50 million citizens facing severe food shortages within 6 standard months. She paused, watching as a transmission encoding confirmed that her message was being broadcast across the Galactic Communication Network. The data packet included everything: detailed biological analysis of the blight, soil composition reports, population distribution charts, and desperate projections showing how quickly her people would begin dying once the food ran out. The organism has proven resistant to all known treatments and continues to spread despite our containment efforts. Our agricultural moon Vidania, which produces 85% of our food supply, is completely uninhabitable for farming purposes. We have exhausted our emergency reserves and our ability to purchase sufficient supplies from neighboring systems. The holographic display showed a prepared documentation scrolling past, images of dead cropland stretching to every horizon, microscopic views of the alien fungus consuming everything organic it touched, and population centers where rationing lines stretched for kilometers. We formally request standard humanitarian aid under Article 12 of the Galactic Mutual Assistance Treaty. We require emergency food supplies for approximately 50 million beings for 6 standard months, basic medical provisions to treat malnutrition-related illnesses, and any technical assistance the Council can provide with agricultural restoration efforts. Lyra's voice wavered slightly as she concluded. Any help the Council can provide would be deeply appreciated. Our children are already showing signs of nutritional deficiency. Without intervention, we estimate complete population collapse within 8 months. This is Ambassador Lyra, ending transmission. The message raced across the galaxy through quantum relay networks, reaching the homeworlds of every species that belonged to the Galactic Aid Council. Most civilizations, when faced with such requests, would respond predictably. The Aquatic Federation would send 2 or 3 cargo ships filled with algae-based protein paste. The crystalline hegemony might contribute some mineral supplements. The Insectoid Collective would offer precisely calculated rations designed to prevent starvation without providing comfort. This was standard galactic aid, minimal, efficient, and designed to keep beings alive while they solved their own problems. No species wanted to commit too many resources to external crises when they had their own populations to consider. But the message also reached Terra Station, humanity's newest diplomatic outpost on the edge of Council space. Captain Diana Foster, a career military officer who'd been assigned to monitor galactic affairs, read the transmission while reviewing her morning intelligence reports. Foster was typical of Earth's diplomatic corps, technically a civilian liaison but with 30 years of military logistics experience. She understood supply chains, population management, and crisis response on a scale that most galactic species couldn't comprehend. She read through the Nexary Crisis Report twice, cross-referencing it with Earth's databases on agricultural disasters. To her experienced eye, this wasn't just a food shortage, it was an extinction event in progress. Foster drafted her response to Earth High Command with the efficiency of someone who'd managed humanitarian crises across dozens of star systems. Her message was simple and direct. Standard humanitarian crisis detected. Nexary Republic facing population collapse due to agricultural failure. 50 million beings at risk. Recommend immediate response per Protocol 7. She attached a full Nexary data package and marked it with humanity's highest priority flag for humanitarian intervention. What Ambassador Lyra didn't understand, what no species in the galaxy truly comprehended yet, was that humans had a fundamentally different definition of standard aid. When most civilizations heard humanitarian crisis, they thought about minimal intervention. When humans heard those same words, they started mobilizing fleets. Admiral James Parker stood in the Strategic Operations Center at Terra Command, surrounded by holographic displays that showed the real-time status of Earth's military and logistics network spanning half the galaxy. The massive chamber hummed with activity as dozens of officers monitored everything from cargo ship movements to agricultural output across human space. To most galactic species, this would have looked like the command center for a galactic empire. To humans, it was just their standard logistics coordination facility. Parker, a veteran of 3 major humanitarian crises and 2 colonial wars, read through Captain Foster's report with the practiced eye of someone who'd seen civilization collapse. The Nexary data painted a clear picture, an entire species facing extinction within months due to complete agricultural failure. The fungal blight was unlike anything in human databases, but the solution was obvious. Commander Wells, he called to his aide, a sharp-eyed officer who managed his communications. Get me President Roberts on Priority Channel 1, and activate the Humanitarian Crisis Council. We're going to need everyone. Commander Patricia Wells nodded and immediately began placing calls through Earth's quantum communication network. Within minutes, secure channels were opening to the highest levels of human government, military leadership, and civilian agencies. The response was immediate and massive. President Michelle Roberts was in the middle of a trade negotiation with the Martian Colony Council when a secure communicator chirped with a distinctive tone reserved for humanitarian emergencies. She excused herself from the meeting and was connected to Terra Command within seconds. Admiral Parker, what do we have? Roberts asked, her voice carrying the authority of someone who'd led humanity through expansion across dozens of star systems. 50 million beings facing starvation, Madam President. Complete agricultural collapse on their primary food production facility. The Nexary Republic sent a request for standard aid to the Galactic Council. Roberts was already reviewing the data package on her personal display. Time frame: 6 months until mass starvation begins. 8 months until complete population collapse. The President of Earth didn't hesitate for a second. Authorize full humanitarian response. I want options on my desk in 1 hour. Across Earth's government, the humanitarian crisis protocols activated like a vast machine designed for exactly this purpose. Defense Secretary William Hayes was pulled out of a budget meeting and immediately began coordinating with Admiral Parker. Secretary of Agriculture Janet Brooks started calculating food production requirements. The head of the Colonial Development Agency, Director Michael Toner, began reviewing available terraforming resources. Within the hour, President Roberts sat in the Oval Office with her full cabinet, holographic displays showing logistics charts that would have overwhelmed most galactic governments. The scale of what they were planning was staggering. What's our response capability? Roberts asked. Defense Secretary Hayes pulled up 3-dimensional charts showing ship movements across human space. We can have the first wave there in 7 to 2 hours. I'm recommending Operation Abundance, full agricultural intervention with permanent infrastructure development. The holographic display showed a fleet composition that defied belief: 4 to 7 colony ships, each capable of housing 50,000 beings and establishing complete agricultural systems. 200 cargo vessels loaded with everything from seeds to atmospheric processes. Mobile hydroponic facilities the size of small cities. Terraforming equipment designed to turn barren rocks into garden worlds. The Nexary asked for 6 months of food aid, Director Turner noted. We're proposing to rebuild their entire agricultural civilization. Good, Robert replied without hesitation. We don't do temporary fixes when people are dying. Deploy everything we need. Agricultural Secretary Brooks highlighted the human response capabilities. We're mobilizing 50,000 specialists from across human space. Agricultural engineers, terraforming experts, soil biologists, atmospheric scientists, and enough farmers to establish permanent food security for their entire sector. Admiral Parker coordinated the deployment from Terra Command, watching as humanity's vast logistics network shifted into crisis mode. Shipyards across the solar system began preparing vessels that had been in routine maintenance. Colony ships that were scheduled for routine supply runs were suddenly loaded with terraforming equipment. Cargo vessels carrying trade goods were redirected to pick up agricultural supplies. Colonel Robert Mitchell, commanding the deployment from Lunar Base, stood before the largest assembly of humanitarian personnel in human history. The massive hangar bays of Lunar Base stretched for kilometers, filled with ships that would carry hope to a dying world. All unit commanders, this is standard humanitarian protocol, Mitchell announced to the assembled fleet captains. We have 50 million civilians facing extinction. Failure is not an option. Every ship, every person, every piece of equipment we're sending represents our commitment to ensuring no species dies on our watch. Captain Lisa Thompson, commanding the agricultural vessel Green Earth *, reviewed her manifest with amazement. Colonel, we're carrying enough hydroponic equipment to feed 1 billion beings. The Nexary only have 50 million people. Better to overestimate than watch people starve, Captain, Mitchell replied. That's the human way. The fleet preparation was a marvel of human efficiency. Automated loading systems transferred thousands of tons of supplies per hour. Robotic assistants handled delicate atmospheric processing equipment, while human specialists prepared biological samples that could restore entire ecosystems. To the human preparing the fleet, this was routine. They'd responded to agricultural crises on dozens of worlds, always with the same principle: eliminate the problem completely. When humans committed to helping, they didn't just address the immediate crisis, they made sure it could never happen again. Admiral Parker watched the final preparations from his command center, satisfied with what he saw. The largest humanitarian fleet in human history was preparing to deploy, and everyone involved treated it as just another day at the office. This was how humans approach problems, with overwhelming force, unlimited resources, and an absolute refusal to accept half measures when lives were at stake. Ambassador Lyra sat in her office reviewing the morning's rationing reports when her emergency communicator erupted with urgent alerts. Her aide, Sub-Ambassador Kef, burst through the door with his usually calm demeanor completely shattered. Ambassador, we're detecting massive hyperspace distortions on the edge of the system. He gasped, his blue skin pale with shock. Multiple contacts, more than our sensors can count. Lyra rushed to the observation deck of the Capitol building, where the planet's defense coordinator General Vex was already monitoring the situation through a massive holographic display. The Nexary defense grid, designed to track incoming cargo ships and the occasional diplomatic vessel, was completely overwhelmed. How many ships? Lyra asked, dreading the answer. General Vex stared at his instruments in disbelief. The computers keep resetting the count. We're reading over 250 distinct signatures, but that's impossible. No species in the galaxy deploys fleets that large for humanitarian aid. Through the observation deck's transparent aluminum windows, Lyra could see the first signs of arrival. Tiny points of light appeared in the star field, growing brighter as massive vessels dropped out of hyperspace with perfect precision. But these weren't the small cargo ships she'd expected from the Galactic Aid Council. Her sensor operator stammered from his station. I'm reading signatures larger than our entire orbital defense grid. This isn't an aid convoy. This looks like an invasion fleet. The lead ship emerged from hyperspace like a small moon entering the system. The vessel was unlike anything in galactic databases, angular, functional, and absolutely massive. Behind it came wave after wave of ships, sleek colony vessels the size of cities, cargo ships that dwarf the largest Nexary freighters, and strange cylindrical vessels covered in what looked like atmospheric processing equipment. Lyra's hands trembled as she watched the impossible sight. The largest humanitarian response in galactic history typically involved 3 or 4 cargo ships carrying basic rations. This was a fleet capable of conquering entire star systems. The flagship, a colossal vessel that the sensors identified as nearly 15 kilometers long, positioned itself in standard diplomatic formation and opened a communication channel. The holographic display flickered to life, showing a human officer in a crisp military uniform. Ambassador Lyra, this is Admiral James Parker of the Earth Humanitarian Fleet. The human said with calm professionalism, "We received your aid request and we're here to assist with your agricultural crisis, requesting permission to begin relief operations." Lyra stared at the hologram, trying to process what she was seeing. The human looked completely serious, as if deploying a fleet that could invade half the galaxy was perfectly normal. "Admiral Parker," she managed, her voice barely steady. "There must be some mistake. We only requested basic food supplies for our population. Standard humanitarian aid." Admiral Parker nodded as if this explained everything. "Understood, Ambassador. We're prepared to address your food security situation comprehensively. Colonel Hayes will coordinate ground operations while our orbital teams establish agricultural platforms throughout your system." Before Lyra could respond, the human fleet began deploying with mechanical precision that spoke of tremendous experience. Colony ships moved toward the system's 3 barren moons, their massive hulls bristling with equipment she couldn't identify. Other vessels began detailed sensor sweeps of every planetary body in the system, including rocks that the Nexary had never bothered to survey. The most shocking sight was watching terraforming vessels, ships she'd only heard about in theoretical discussions, begin atmospheric analysis of worlds that had been lifeless for millions of years. Automated probe swarms launched from the human ships, spreading throughout the system like a technological cloud. They are surveying everything," General Vex whispered in amazement. "Every moon, every asteroid, every planet in our system. What are they planning?" The answer came in the form of landing shuttles approaching Nexary Prime. Unlike the small diplomatic craft used by most species, these were massive transportation vehicles that could carry entire engineering battalions. The lead shuttle requested landing clearance at the capital's main spaceport. Major Lisa Cooper emerged from the first shuttle wearing what looked like standard human military gear, but Lyra could see advanced technological systems integrated throughout her equipment. Behind her came teams of humans unloading containers, vehicles, and devices that hummed with barely contained energy. "Ambassador Lyra," Major Cooper said with a cheerful smile that somehow managed to be both reassuring and terrifying, "we're here to solve your food crisis. Where would you like us to start?" Lyra stared at the humans who were already unloading enough equipment to supply a small war. Massive atmospheric processors, mobile hydroponic facilities, soil analysis laboratories, and vehicles designed for planetary engineering operations. The scale was overwhelming. "Major, I think there's been a misunderstanding," Lyra said carefully. "We just needed basic food supplies for 6 months while we recover from our agricultural crisis." Cooper's smile widened as more shuttles landed behind her, disgorging teams of specialists and equipment that looked designed to rebuild entire worlds. "Don't worry, Ambassador. You'll have that and much more. We're going to make sure this never happens again." Behind her, human engineers were already assembling what looked like a mobile command center, complete with holographic displays showing detailed analysis of the entire Nexary system. Other teams are preparing vehicles for immediate deployment to the dead agricultural moon. In fact, Cooper continued, consulting a tablet that displayed more data than most galactic governments process in a year. "We're planning to establish permanent food security for your entire sector. Can't have people going hungry when there are perfectly good planets just waiting to be turned into garden worlds." Lyra realized with growing amazement that the humans weren't just responding to a crisis. They were implementing complete transformation of Nexary civilization. And to them, this was apparently routine. What had started as Ambassador Lyra's simple request for emergency food supplies was rapidly becoming the most comprehensive agricultural revolution in galactic history. Dr. Kevin Martinez, leading the soil rehabilitation team, stood in what used to be a thriving grain field on Vidania, now reduced to gray dust by the fungal blight. Around him, human engineers operated equipment that looked more like molecular assembly systems and farming tools. The problem isn't just a fungus. Martinez explained to a group of stunned Nexri scientists who'd been studying the blight for months without success. Your soil composition has 17 critical vulnerabilities that make this kind of contamination inevitable. The Nexri lead scientist, Dr. Yish, watched in amazement as human machines began rebuilding the molecular structure of the soil itself. Dr. Martinez, we only asked for food aid. You're rebuilding our planet's entire ecosystem. Martinez looked genuinely surprised by the comment. Well, yeah, we can't just give you food and leave the underlying problem unsolved. That would be irresponsible. The human soil rehabilitation process was unlike anything the Nexri had imagined possible. Massive atmospheric processes worked alongside molecular assemblers that could restructure matter at the atomic level. The dead-gray dust were being transformed into rich, fertile earth that could resist not just a current blight, but any similar organism that might evolve in the future. We're implementing redundancies for each failure point, Martinez continued, pulling up holographic displays that showed soil composition maps spanning the entire moon. Backup nutrient systems, immune-boosting minerals, and fail-safe biological agents that will activate if any harmful organism tries to establish itself. Above the planet, an even more incredible sight was taking shape. Commander Jennifer Adams led the orbital construction teams that were assembling floating agricultural platforms in space. These weren't simple hydroponic gardens. They were self-contained ecosystems the size of cities, each one capable of feeding millions of beings. How many people are you planning to feed? General Vex asked as he watched the construction through his command center's viewports. The orbital farms were so large they cast shadows on the planet's surface. Current calculations show capacity for about 500 million beings. Adams replied casually over the communication link. We figured we'd build in some room for population growth and emergency reserves. The Nexri population was 50 million. The humans had built agricultural capacity for 10 times that number, treating it as a basic safety margin. But the orbital farms were just the beginning. Throughout the Nexri system, terraforming operations were transforming dead rocks into garden worlds. 3 planets that had been barren for millions of years were being given atmospheres, water systems, and climates perfect for agriculture. Ambassador Lyra stood on the observation deck of a government building, watching massive atmospheric processes working on the closest barren planet. The machines were the size of mountains, pumping millions of tons of carefully designed atmosphere into what had been a lifeless rock just weeks ago. Admiral Parker, she said during their daily briefing, is all this really necessary? We just needed enough food to survive until we could rebuild our farms. Admiral Parker looked at her with the patient expression of someone explaining something obvious to a child. Ambassador, we don't do temporary solutions. When humans commit to helping, we eliminate the problem entirely. What's the point of keeping your people alive for 6 months if they are just going to face the same crisis again later? The scale of human intervention continued to expand every day. Major Timothy Brooks coordinated what he called the Genetic Preservation Project, which involved creating backup libraries for every plant species in Nexri space. Human teams traveled to every world and moon in their territory, collecting and cataloging biological samples with scientific thoroughness that impressed even the Nexri's best researchers. We're basically making your entire food supply bulletproof against any future crisis, Brooks explained while overseeing construction of massive biological storage facilities. Climate change, disease, asteroid impacts, solar flares, alien invasion, your food security will survive anything. The genetic libraries were just one part of a comprehensive approach that included weather control systems, backup seed vaults on multiple worlds, automated farming networks, and emergency food production capabilities that could feed the entire sector during crisis. Captain Patricia Walsh led the agricultural education teams that were training thousands of Nexri in human farming techniques. You will have the knowledge to maintain and expand these systems long after we leave, she told groups of eager students. Plus, we're leaving behind automated systems that can handle most problems without human intervention. The transformation was visible from space. Dead worlds were turning green as human terraforming equipment worked around the clock. Orbital installations sparkled like jewels around every planet. The entire Nexri system was being converted into an agricultural powerhouse that could feed dozens of neighboring civilizations. Within 3 months, the Nexary Republic went from facing extinction to having the most advanced agricultural infrastructure in the galaxy. Other species watched in amazement as humans treated what should have been a simple aid mission like a full-scale terraforming operation. Trade delegations began arriving from across the sector, eager to purchase food from the Nexary's new agricultural surplus. What had been a dying civilization was now the envy of their neighbors, with farming technology that wouldn't look out of place in the core worlds. Ambassador Lyra realized that asking humans for a small aid had been like asking a supervolcano for gentle warming, impossible by definition. When humans decided to help, they didn't just solve the immediate problem. They made sure it could never happen again, anywhere, ever. 6 months after Ambassador Lyra had sent her desperate plea for basic food supplies, she stood in her newly renovated office looking out at a sight that still took her breath away every morning. Orbital farming platforms sparkled like jewels around Nexary Prime, their crystalline structures catching the light of their sun and reflecting it in rainbow patterns across the sky. Each platform was larger than a capital city and produced enough food to feed millions of beings. The transformation was so complete that visiting diplomats often mistook the Nexary system for one of the galaxy's core worlds. 3 planets that had been lifeless rocks were now garden worlds with blue skies, white clouds, and vast green continents. The agricultural output of the Nexary Republic had gone from zero to enough food to supply their entire sector of the galaxy. "It's still hard to believe," she murmured to her aide, Sub-Ambassador Kef, who was reviewing the latest export reports. 6 months ago we were facing extinction. Now we have delegations from 4 to 7 different species requesting food shipments. The numbers were staggering. The Nexary Republic was now the primary food supplier for dozens of star systems. Their agricultural technology, all provided by humanity, was so advanced that other species were sending their best scientists to study it. The orbital farms alone could feed 1 billion beings, and that was just the beginning. Admiral Parker arrived for their final meeting as the last of the human humanitarian fleet prepared to depart. He'd become a familiar sight over the months, always calm and professional, treating the complete transformation of an entire star system as just another day at the office. "Admiral Parker," Lyra said as they sat in her office, the view of orbital farm filling the windows behind them. "I think I understand now. When we asked humans for small aid..." Parker smiled, the expression both amused and understanding. "You asked a species that's never learned to think small, Ambassador. We're incapable of half measures when people's lives are at stake." He gestured toward the window, where human cargo ships were transferring the last of their equipment to Nexary crews who'd been trained to maintain the vast agricultural network. "On oath, when we face a problem, we don't just solve it, we make sure it can never happen again. It's not in our nature to do temporary fixes." The transformation was indeed complete. 3 barren worlds had become garden planets with carefully engineered ecosystems that could resist any known blight or disease. Orbital farms produced food for dozens of star systems using technology that was centuries ahead of most galactic civilizations. The Nexary were now exporting not just food, but agricultural technology across the galaxy. But the most significant change wasn't in the Nexary system. It was in how the galaxy understood human assistance. Word of the human response had spread throughout civilized space faster than ships could travel. Diplomatic channels buzzed with reports of the species that had treated a simple aid request like a complete terraforming operation. The first test of the new galactic understanding came when the crystalline hegemony faced a similar agricultural crisis on one of their mining worlds. Their leadership, having heard about the Nexary situation, requested minimal assistance from Earth, expecting perhaps a few cargo ships with basic supplies. Instead, they received a full terraforming fleet. Admiral Parker had led that operation personally, treating the crystalline hegemony's minimal assistance request exactly the same way humans treated every humanitarian crisis. Within weeks, the failing mining world had been transformed into an agricultural paradise with enough food production capacity to supply half the crystalline territories. "We keep getting requests for limited human aid," Commander Patricia Wells noted as she reviewed the latest diplomatic communications. "They still don't understand that we don't do limited." The Galactic Aid Council had been forced to update their protocols after the third species requesting small aid received a complete agricultural revolution. The new warning appeared in diplomatic databases across the galaxy. Human standard response: prepare for complete solution of all related problems. Ambassador Lyra's personal communicator chimed with an incoming message from the Aquatic Federation. She read it with growing amusement. Another species facing crop failures, but this time they were specifically requesting the human definition of aid. Admiral, she said, forwarding the message to Parker, another species that wants your particular brand of help. Parker read the message and chuckled. The Aquatic Federation's ocean worlds would benefit from orbital agricultural platforms. We could probably set up food security for their entire civilization. For a species that just needs help with crop rotation. Lyra asked, why not? If we're going out there anyway, might as well do the job properly. This was a new reality that the galaxy was adapting to. When humans offered aid, they didn't just address the immediate problem. They eliminated every related issue the species might face for the next 1,000 years. Asking Earth for help with food shortage meant receiving agricultural technology that could feed 10 times your population. Requesting medical supplies meant getting complete hospital systems and medical colleges. The ripple effects were transforming galactic civilization. Species that had struggled with basic survival were suddenly operating at technological levels that rivaled the core worlds. Trade networks expanded as worlds that had never produced surplus goods became exporters. The overall quality of life across the galaxy improved dramatically wherever humans had provided aid. Captain Diana Foster, still monitoring galactic affairs from Terra Station, filed a quarterly report with satisfaction. Human humanitarian interventions continue to exceed expectations. 17 species have requested aid in the past 3 months. All operations resulted in complete infrastructure transformation of target civilizations. The galaxy had learned that asking humans for help meant accepting that they would solve not just your immediate problem, but every related problem you might face for generations. It was an understanding that changed how civilizations approach crises entirely. Sometimes the best way to handle a problem was to make it impossible for that problem to ever occur again. And nobody in the galaxy was better at impossible solutions than the humans from Sol 3, who had never learned to think small when lives were on the line. **, the END **.